Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. I beg the member's pardon. Point of order, the Honourable Ruth Dyson.
I seek leave to table a letter dated 15th of July from Capital and Coast outlining the nearly $5 million reduction in their mental health spend for the coming year.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Question number 7, Chris Auchinvole.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister for the Environment and asks, how are the government's resource management reforms assisting the economic recovery with jobs and investments?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the Resource Management Streamline and Simplifying Amendment Act 2009 is assisting by reducing the delays for investors in getting resource consents for new developments. A good example is the new Countdown supermarket north of Auckland. That was the very first case under the new law of a direct referral to the Environment Court. The application was lodged in the court in February and approved in June, a period of just 4 months. This $22 million development involves 3,500 square metres of retail space and will employ 160 New Zealanders when it opens next year.
Chris Auchinvole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister. How do the time frames for this new supermarket compare with others historically north of Auckland, and what specific provisions made a material difference to this consent being processed so quickly?
Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I think all members of the House are aware of the RMA circus that has occurred so often in the past with such supermarket developments. The worst case was the Wairau Park Pack and Save that took 12 years to resolve, from the application in April 1997 to finally being improved in February 2009 through 7 separate hearings and appeals. The key changes that have enabled this tight process is firstly enabling direct referral to the Environment Court so that there is only one hearing, and specifically prohibiting objections from competitors. The dividend of this policy and law change is this $22 million investment and 160 new jobs.
Chris Auchinvole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, is there any evidence, given the concern from opposition parties that these streamlined processes would compromise the environment, that this new development is of any lesser standard than those that have taken over a decade to get approval?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, no, to the contrary. This development is widely supported by the local community and the council. The Environment Court concluded that this development would increase the vibrancy and vitality of the area generally and would have significant benefits for the surrounding area. This is a very good example of how the government's policies are good for the environment, are good for jobs and good for growth.
Chauvel. Order, I've called Charles Chauvel.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koe te whare. To the Minister, is the government considering for Phase 2 of its Resource Management Act reforms restricting appeals to points of law only rather than having them on the merits of the decision or the policy, as was done in Part 3 of the legislation abolishing ECAN?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, there are 10 different work streams to our Phase 2 of those RMA reforms. The particular work that focuses on the issue raised by the member is that around infrastructure, in which this government is determined to get infrastructure built more quickly as part of our growth plans for New Zealand. And secondly, the issues around urban design, where we do not believe the RMA has worked well in bringing together the good development of cities like Auckland and the infrastructure at the right time. We're awaiting those final reports before we'll make decisions on the detail of those Phase 2 reforms.
Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is the likelihood of the Land and Water Forum reporting back to the government on 31 August, given reports that tempers are fraying between environment groups and the dairy sector over key elements of the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management? And what effect will any delay have on the introduction of any new legislation or policy?
Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I think everybody in this House would acknowledge that there are real challenges around the intensification of agriculture and its impacts on water quality. The previous government struggled in this area. We have attempted to bring the various parties together with the Land and Water Forum. I remain optimistic that that collaborative process will deliver a program by which we can deliver on the blue-green ideals of this government to grow the economy and to maintain the high standards that are so important for our country.
Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I listened carefully to the Minister's answer. My question was specifically about whether or not there were likely to be delays in the report, which was the subject of the question, and if there were delays, whether that would have any effect on any reforms to law or policy. I'm not sure that the Minister addressed that question, sir.
I'll hear the Honourable Dr Nick Smith on the point of order.
The member in his question specifically referred to tensions in the Land and Water Forum, which is due to report by the end of this month, and I responded fairly to the point that the member had raised.
I think there's merit in the Minister's response to that point of order. Had the member asked specifically, will the forum report by a certain date, then we could have pinned the Minister down. But given the rest of the question, I believe it's not reasonable to ask me to pin the Minister down to any part of it. Question number 8, the Honourable Trevor Mallett.